In this exercise, we're going to write a program where the user provides any number between 1 and 20, and then the program will guess what that number is. So it will continue guessing until it gets the correct number. And while it's guessing, it will count the number of guesses, and in the end, a message box will be displayed that says how many guesses it took. We have to start by deciding what our form is going to look like. So I'm going to start by changing the form's text to the guessing game. And then we need an input field for the user to provide the number between 1 and 20. So I'm going to use a numeric up-down for that. And I'm going to set its minimum and maximum value to 1 and 20 respectively. I'm just going to say NUD number. And okay, I'm just going to make it a bit smaller. So I'm going to change its maximum to 20 and its minimum is set to 0, so I'm just going to change that to 1. So that is just to make sure that the user actually gives a number between 1 and 20. Then we're just going to add a label to give the user an instruction. I'm going to say enter any number from 1 to 20. And other than that, we just need the play button. So all the processing is going to happen in the event handler of this button. So I'm just going to change the text to play and name button btn play. Okay, so that is our interface. So when we run the program, the user will provide a number between 1 and 20. We'll click on play, and in the end we will get a message box that says this is how many times the program had to guess before it got to the right number. Right, so let's write this event handler. So we are going to need a variable to store the user's number in. Okay, we are also going to need a variable for the guess. Now we're going to implement this guess through a random number generator. So the random number generator will repeatedly generate a number between 1 and 20, and every time we will test, is it equal to the user's number? If it is, we stop. If it's not, we continue guessing. Okay, so that number, the random number, will be stored in guess. Then we also have to count every guess. So I'm just going to declare a variable count guesses. And since we will guess at least once, or the computer will guess at least once before the program can end, we will set this to 1 to begin with. I'll talk a little bit more about this. So this is the counter for the guesses. Right. So those are our declarations. Now we can assign to user number the value that the user supplied in the numeric up-down. Okay, and as we know by now, that is value is a decimal, so we have to change it to an integer, and we've seen in the previous example this is one way of changing the value to an integer. Okay, so now we have to make our first guess. So for that we need the random number generator. So I'm going to create a random number generator called my random new random, and by now you know that this is how we create one. And then I'm going to make the first guess and say guess is equal to my random next, and I want the value to be from 1 to 20, so I have to make the upper bound 21. Okay, right. So now this is now where the sentinel controlled while loop comes in. We are now going to use a while loop to check whether this is equal to the user's number. If it's not, we're going to go into the while loop, create a new random number, and so on. So I'm going to say while guess is not equal to user number, we're going to continue guessing. Okay. Now if that condition is false, it means that the guess was correct and we want to stop the while loop, in which case we're going to display the answer. So then we're going to say the number of guesses were, and add count guesses. Okay, so overall the logic is that we get the user's number, we generate our first guess, we check is that guess equal to the user number. If it is not, we will go in and go and declare inside the while loop a new one. If it is, that will be false, and we will jump out of the while loop and the message box with the answer will be shown. So what we're going to do inside here is just generate another random number and add 1 to the counter. I made a spelling mistake. Okay, that's it. So now, if guess is not equal to user number, we want to generate a new guess. So we generate that, we add 1 to the number of guesses, and then we go and check, is that new guess equal to user number? If it is not, we go in again, we generate a third one. We add 1 to the counter, and then we go back and test it. And we continue until guess is equal to user number, in which case this will be false. Then we jump out and then we display the number of guesses. Let's just run this. Okay, so I say 15 and play. It says the number of guesses were 11. But there's no way for us, we must just assume this is working correctly. So we can run it a few times and see if we get the same answer every time, we know there's something wrong. Okay, 1, number of guesses is 7, 19, 56, and so on. Okay, so that is the program. So let's just quickly talk about the fact that this is a sentinel controlled loop and not a counter controlled loop. In this case, guess is what we call the sentinel variable, because this is the variable on which the loop depends. And guess is not a counter variable. So the value of guess depends on what value the random number generator has given it. Okay, so the condition, in other words, depends on that variable guess, the value of that variable. For the while loop to work correctly, that variable's value must change somewhere inside the body of the loop. Otherwise, it might never happen that that thing becomes false. We are using a counter in this specific example, but that doesn't make the while loop a counter-driven while loop. we just need the counter to count how many times the while loop executes, because that represents the number of guesses in the context of this program. We are not using the count variable inside the while condition, and that is why this is not a counter-driven while loop.